I just wanted to make a quick little video here. It's going to be a little less formal, but us going through the guitars, because I know some people who really care about music and guitars may want to have a little bit more information. So that's what we're going to do. Basically, I just kind of want to walk through the components that I use because I didn't really cover it very much in the video.
Yeah, I don't think either of us did.
So I'm using a Strat style neck. It's a licensed neck, licensed from Fender. It's not made by them. It's a Might neck, I believe. Seems great. Seems exactly like the Strat neck that I have. I've got some hot-rodded Seymour Duncan humbuckers, and I just bought them separately and then bought a Les Paul electronics kit. Put that in. It was super easy to put together. I 3D printed the kind of boxes to put these into.
Oh, you did, didn't
And so they're inset in there. They fit really well, but I think they could be a little bit taller because I'm kind of maxed out about how close I can get the pickups to these. So that's one thing I may go back and change, is just print taller versions of those so I have a little bit more throw. I have not adjusted the bridge at all, and it's all the way down. So if I were to want to lift this at all, I would have to end up lowering the neck and some stuff like that, but I don't think I need to. It sounds fine. I like the action as it stands now because I ended up putting a shim underneath the neck.
Yeah.
That shim made a really big difference and got the action where I like it. It sounds good. Like all three of the different positions have the sounds that you would expect. I think these pickups have a really nice kind of brightness to them, and I'm not like a pickup snob, so I don't really know a whole lot between them, but I like the way that these sound. The Bigsby was another thing that a lot of people don't like. I love these things. I love the way they look. I love the sound that they give, which is pretty cool. It's not a whammy bar, it's like a tremolo bar. Yep. It's a little bit different. There's a bunch of different styles of these. I had to get this one because it's made to go on a flat top, and it just barely hangs over the kind of roll off here. But it's placed to like as far back as it can go and still have the contact that it needs. So this one worked out. I bought another one made for arch tops, but unfortunately it's expecting a flat surface down here, and since mine's offset, it couldn't mount right down there. So went back to this one. This works fine. And I guess like as far as the things I would do differently, if I were to do something differently, I would probably work a little bit harder to get the electronics, and I could still do this, get them out of the way because you can see them down through that sound hole. I would probably place this a little bit differently because the space that the switch fits into, I can't turn it.
Oh, because of the
prongs stick out, and the opening just needs to be widened a little bit, but it's not really worth trying to do again. There's some kind of stuff, like little pits in the wood, that I think filling before I put finish on it would have been good long term, but I mean, they're not causing a problem. As far as finish, I did tung oil finish, which has some polyurethane in it. Once I did a couple coats of that, I went over it with a bunch of coats of polyurethane. I did not do grain filler.
Yep.
And that's a thing I looked up, but we couldn't get it for several weeks, and it wasn't going to be worthwhile. But now that I have the finish on it, I see why that would be beneficial, because even with like 10 coats of polyurethane, you can see the really low points of the grain are still there.
And you don't like that?
Well, not...
Because I think that's a preference, because I think the bases that I've made in the past, I like to see the wood grain in mine. So that's just a personal preference, I think.
I think, yeah, just having a thicker glossy finish is what I'm used to, but with my other guitars. But I think having the clear grain filler would lift that surface up so that it was a little bit more even. You know, it's just a thing. I do think it needs more clear on it, though. I think eventually this finish is going to be thin enough that it's going to start to scratch and wear a little bit. But, I mean, I can pull everything off of it and refinish it. That's not a big deal. So that's kind of the walkthrough of this thing. I just wanted everybody to hear, you know, how clean it was. It stays in tune. It's nice to play. I didn't talk about the tuners here. These are locking tuners, which is not something I've used, I don't think, before. So that you lock the string in on the back. I got black because originally I was going to do all black hardware. I was going to powder coat the Bigsby so that everything would be black on it, and then I just ran out of time to even test that. And so now that I have all this chrome down here, I wish that these were chrome.
Oh, just a balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can change that. That's not a big deal. So that's my guitar. I think if you have questions about this one specifically, leave them down in the comments. I have a question, and I will try to answer them.
I will be the first question for those wondering. Do you notice, since all of the guitars that you have out there are not a semi-hollow body, do you notice a tone difference using the pockets on the inside? Does it create a difference?
I think it does a little bit, but honestly, I haven't played any of the other ones since I made this. Okay. I've only been playing this one, so I can't compare it. I did play my Strat a little bit before this was finished, because we were mocking up the music that we did in the other video. And so I played the original demo for that on the Strat. The neck feels the same, obviously, but it definitely has a different sound. Now, I don't know if that sound is because of the hollow body or the fact that it's humbuckers and the Strat is single coils.
Yep.
Could be that. I don't know. I'd have to like play them next to each other and compare.
Do a blind sound check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's this one. Give us some information about the bass.
So overall, this is not Excalibur. There are some things that I'm really proud of and some things that, in hindsight, I did incorrectly. But all along the way when I was designing this, I was trying to find information. So when I was designing, say, the neck, like how thick are most necks? Because a Fender style neck or a Squier neck or a Jazz Master or a Music Man typically have a thicker neck with the kind of parallel swoopy head. I've typically played Ibanez styles that have a more shallow curve on the back of the neck and have an angled head. So I was trying to work with my skill set at the time and the information that I found about how deep the profile on the back of the neck is. I think I got wrong because I didn't account for the thickness of the fingerboard. So the back of the neck is a lot thicker than I'm used to. It's not bad. It doesn't affect how it plays. It's just the way that it feels. So that's one thing that if I were to make this again, or I can take the Fusion 360 model and I can just adjust some numbers and the whole thing will change. So that's one thing that I definitely wish I would have done differently. The fingerboard is made out of walnut. It's not made out of ebony or rosewood as most are typically made because I have this in my shop. I did not put the indicators.
Can you feel a difference there at all?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. It just looks. It as dark as walnut is, in contrast to most of the things that we use, it's still not dark enough to be a very noticeable guitar neck standard.
This is rosewood for reference.
And the indicators that are on most, the 357 up to 12 and everything, I did not put on here. I want to say as an aesthetic choice by the designer, but mostly it was an oversight. And I just thought about it too late. So I didn't add those. I added some indicators here on the side where I would look. So this is more handy for me than it is on the fingerboard itself anyway. I had intentions of going in with a drill bit and just drilling these and then filling them with some epoxy, or maybe some crushed up pieces of shell or something that people tend to do with some CA glue. But I didn't because I ran out of time, and so these are a paint marker. But
is that something you're going to do in the future?
On this one, no. So that's the neck. So shortcomings with the neck, but ultimately, it is flat. I did not level the frets I don't know if I mentioned it in the video about needing to level the frets. It's okay. I'm going to turn it on just a little bit so you can hear it. So it doesn't buzz. So it doesn't buzz by itself, which is good because I was expecting it to buzz like crazy because it's the first time I've ever done frets. It buzzes a little bit, but not too bad. But ultimately, I'm happy with this. I can go back and hone it just to make it better. But I like that there are defects in this one because I hope that those defects shine enough to bother me to make a third version, which will just be getting closer and closer to the bullseye that I have in my head. And there's things about the body and the neck that I wouldn't have known if it would have stayed a digital model. So turns down. So the body. The body design is based off of Rickenbacker, so without the scallops, all of the flats on the top are a traditional Rickenbacker style, and then I went into Fusion and added these tapers here and here. I added an arm scoop here, but it's in the wrong position, so I play right at the apex of those two things. So this needs to be one continuous scallop rather than two segmented pieces.
Right.
So that's one thing that I would change. The stripes in the middle, So let me explain how that happened kind of briefly. So a Rickenbacker style bass guitar, when you were to cut the guitar in half, has more mass on the lower side than it does on the upper side. So while I designed this entire thing in Fusion with a common center line down the neck, the headstock, the body, everything, when I made the blank as per the manufacturer tab, it says to cut this thing, you need a minimum of this size blank. So when I cut that, I centered everything to that blank, but the body itself is not centered within that blank, if that makes any sense. The outside parameter is, but the center line is not. So when I started to cut, you can see down here the bridge and the pickups are all shifted up because there's more mass down here. So I realized that after the fact, and if I didn't add the stripes, you would have never noticed because it would have just been cherry all day. But because I did that, it bothered me to the point where I wanted to cover it up, so I made a pickguard. And this pickguard I cut out on the laser using the walnut veneers that Glowforge offers, and then I was able to place it underneath the little accent on the fingerboard around the pickups and just stick it in place. One thing I am really happy about though, including all of the areas on the back, is because this was a completely digitally manifested item, I had the designs, I had the measurements, I had everything available to me at a click. I didn't have to go in and measure things and sneak up to the line to make sure it fit just right. I knew that what I made was going to fit. So taking this pickguard, for example, I just had to come up with a design. That was the hardest part. And then adding it in a post processor, sending it to the laser, hitting cut, and 24 seconds later I had a pickguard because it fit exactly the thing I designed. Same thing with the electronics pocket. The electronics on mine, if anybody is wondering, are not super great. Whenever I was going to make this bass for myself before it became a project video, I have my dream sheet of pickups, preamp, the bridge configuration, the tuners, everything. It got very expensive. And so to be able to do this in a project video on the timeline that we had, I actually bought a Harley Benton bass from, which is not a great bass. It's a sub $400 bass that had 2 humbuckers, a 3-band, so bass, mids, and highs, preamp, a blend, and a volume, everything hardwired for $340.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, so I cannibalized that bass because I kind of didn't like it anyway. And I just put all of that stuff onto this one. So it had the 18-volt batteries, it had all of the electronics already wired up. So in the video when you see me wiring, I am just reconnecting the points that I had to disconnect to take it out of that bass and to put it into this one.
And to be clear, that whole bass was cheaper than the electronics alone that you wanted to get originally.
Parsing out, I was going to have 2 Aguilar pickups, an Aguilar, actually 2-band EQ, or preamp, not a 3-band. And everything that I had parsed out was going to be about $550 to $600. And so just by having that bass as kind of an organ donor was already more economic. So it sounds fine. I'll play a little bit. And if you don't know what the active and the versus passive, one thing I like about this is you just pull up on the volume knob. So if you run out of battery power, as most bass players do from time to time, it automatically goes back into passive mode. So I can turn it up. And this is passive, so this is just the pickups listening to. So this is traditionally what I've always played. I've never had active pickups before. So the lows are low, the highs are kind of muted. Sounds like it's in a can. But when you push the active feature, I'm gonna turn it down because it gets really loud, it has a lot of gain. You're able to adjust the bass, the mids, and the highs. So so you're able to do a lot with that preamp, and I never knew the versatility of a preamp before now. So looking on the back, yeah, mine has a big pit in the back that I filled with epoxy. I need to countersink these screws a little bit better. So there are some decisions that I made just based on the timeline of the video. And I think the freedom that the stripes are off, right? Stripes are jacked up. It's not Excalibur. use this as a piece of homework and not as a showpiece and not as the thing that I'm going to be like perfectly happy with. Gave me a lot of freedom. So not countersinking these screws all the way, not having them, you know, the best hardware that I could find is okay. I needed to attach the neck to the body. That's done. You mentioned shimming the neck. I had to shim the neck on this because even though everything was flat, I know that my model, everything lines up, coplanar. Still had to shim the neck. I bought the nut. I did not make the nut. And then when I originally placed it on here, the bridge was completely bottomed out and I still had terrible action. It was boom, boom, huge.
Yeah.
So just by adding a shim in the neck of like I think I did a 1.5 millimeter shim. This is the best action that I've had on a bass just by that alone. So this is it. I'm kind of happy with it. Like I said, I wouldn't have known that the scoop was in the wrong place unless I would have made it. The design, I like the wood tone of yours because you used an oil-based finish. I had the spray satin lacquer that you used on the guitar refinishing, and that I used on my other bass. So I used that. It's not necessarily water-based, but it didn't really bring out that vibrance that an oil-based finish would have. So that I kind of am hit or miss on. But this was an amazing project because it bumped up my courage level and I was able to kind of move myself over the horizon. I knew what I wanted. I kind of knew how to get there, and I just had to have the confidence to be able to look at other influences, look at people online who do little parts of what I need. There's a channel called Two Cherries Instruments that does a lot of Fusion 360 to CNC jobs, and so I gleaned a lot of information from there. Warwick, the company that makes basses out of Germany, does a lot of videos on taking like very specialized stuff from CNC to handwork. So I was able to convince myself that this was doable. And while it absolutely is doable, this thing plays, it works, I can play it live. It's definitely not Excalibur.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that we were able to do it. I'm happy that we got to do this together.
Yeah.
But this is not the end all. I've already got another one designed. It looks completely different, so I'm just going to keep doing this forever.
I'm really glad that you started this process for yourself, because otherwise I don't think I would have jumped into this. People have been trying to get me to make a guitar for years, and I already have guitars that I don't play, and so it was like kind of hard to justify. This was a good excuse for me to jump into it, and now that I've done one, I was telling you the other day, like, I want to do more, and I don't need them.
It's like tattoos.
At all. I don't need them at all, but I do want to make another one. I want to make a Telecaster. I want to make maybe my own design eventually, you know, but...
Well, so the point that we had in the video was that we were going to make a more complicated instrument on the CNC, and you were going to make the body of a complicated guitar with traditional tools. So having seen me use the CNC and having done this on just traditional tools, if you were to make another one, which route would you go?
This way, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's a personality thing. I think I have like just a inherent hesitation of going to the CNC for something unless it's the best, absolute best way to do it. If I'm like assured, I really enjoyed the shaping of this, and I think I would have lost that enjoyment if I had just done it digitally. I think it's a fun way to do it, but I would have missed the part that I enjoyed.
Well, I'm not sure what people think about that whole process between the two, whether or not mine was faster or mine was more precise. This was the 5th blank that I made up, so it's definitely not more precise. It's garbage in, garbage out. So if you mess up in your model, the robot's going to do exactly what you want it to.
Right.
So, I mean, it's repeatable. So I already have another blank made up that I can take this design and just put it in the robot and let it go. If small-scale manufacturing is your thing.
Yeah.
I think the personal touch, the hand feel, is something that this lacks because I gave it to the robot and I let it go, and if it was a mistake, I had to find out about it after the fact. So I think a mixture of templates and routing and hand carving would have made this process so much faster, which I think maybe another misconception was that, like, oh, I was just done early, which wasn't the case. We both had to make multiples, and I think we finished at just about the same time.
Yeah.
So maybe using the laser or the CNC to make an outer template and just running through that with a flush trim like you did would have made this process so much faster. I think these precise kind of scallops, I wanted them to be nice and clean. But even then I had to go back after the fact with sandpaper. And so it did dull out some of those nice crisp lines. So the benefit of using the CNC versus using templates and hand tools, I don't know if it was as strong as I thought it was originally.
I think there's pluses and minuses both directions, because even though the template thing was, it was easy to follow, it was easy to think through, and like the steps of it, I did find myself needing, like wishing that I had this router bit, because it would make it easier. If I didn't have to switch the bearing from this one to this one to be able to do this particular cut, it would have been a lot faster. So the templates are nice, and would be even nicer if you had a huge range of very specific router bits to be able to quickly move from thing to thing. I was figuring out a lot of like how to make this particular template work with the shape that was underneath it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that type of stuff.
And the same thing for the CNC.
Yeah.
I mean, there are way better and more optimized bits, big round bowl gouges, or not gouges, but router bits you could put on the CNC that would help with the contours and help with the detail work a lot faster than what I did. Although it did work. Again, it was garbage in, garbage out. I'm not taking responsibility away, but the smoothness and the rounded kind of areas could have been done a lot faster and a lot more simple if I didn't use the regular end-mill bits. So just changing a bit on the pattern or changing them in the CNC would have had a pretty dramatic effect.
Right. So I guess it really comes down to, if you're wanting to make guitars at a production level, that's a whole different setup than if you're making one for yourself that's exactly what you want. You can have the time to spend on it, whatever. So anything else you want to cover on these?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
With the hesitation to make a guitar, do you recommend someone who is interested in potentially making their own guitar to go the route that you went?
Yes.
I agree. Because before I did this one, I did this. I bought a kit that was maybe $200 that had the style that I liked, had all the electronics, had a neck that already had a truss rod that was already leveled, and then I just made the body, which is where most of the personality is.
Right.
And so, what advice do you have to someone who is interested in doing this for themselves?
I mean, I think that approach is definitely, I'm happy that I did that for my first build, because I like the way a Strat neck plays. I have a Les Paul, I have Strats, I have some Music Mans, which are, Music Masters, which are smaller necks. I like this neck style the best. And so rather than trying to recreate that by using a bunch of tools and a bunch of measurements and all that stuff, I knew what I was getting out of this.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the part that I interact with, right? So the body shape doesn't really matter. It's what you want it to look like. So I was able to focus on a body that I've always been interested in. I've never seen up close. And I didn't have to worry about any of the other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with Bigsby's. I have one on another guitar. I'm comfortable with humbuckers. I'm comfortable with the Strat neck. And it just let me focus on the thing that was new to me.
Right.
And be comfortable with the rest of it. So I think that's a good way to do it. If you've got a component that you like from another guitar, start there. Use that.
Yeah.
Take it off the other guitar and build around it, and then replace it later. I mean, you can totally do that. So
now, this may look like I reinvented the wheel, but it's surprisingly difficult to find a 5-string bass replacement neck that is not a Fender style. And even then, a 5-string is not easy to find. Right. So I made mine based on scarcity. I like the Ibanez style, like I said earlier, that's thinner. The kit that I got came with one, but when I went to go try to find the neck all by itself, I couldn't find it. So if I were able to go that route, I probably would have. But because I couldn't find what I was looking for, it forced me to kind of knuckle down and go, okay, if I can't find what I need, it'll definitely be cheaper to just make it myself. It'll stretch my skills, and I'll have the confidence to do it better if I do mess this up. So while I wholeheartedly agree, the first bass I made, the neck, the electronics, all that stuff is taken care of. You can focus on the body. When you make one by yourself, the body is like the last thing, which I messed up on. I started with the body like I did last time and realized that I had to start with the fretboard. There's so much information and so many choices you have to make that if you're relatively new to playing or thinking about making, I didn't think of beforehand. And so I started designing backwards. So while in this configuration you can focus on the body, if you want to do the entire thing yourself, you have to focus on the fretboard, which informs the neck, which informs where in the body it goes, which informs the shape of the body. And so it's just a different order of operations.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, I hope this was useful for anybody that's interested in this type of stuff. And if you like this kind of wrap-up, more detailed description of the projects, let us know, because this is something we could easily do on the second channel for a lot of different projects. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll catch you later.